Hey guys, welcome to this month's Real Edinburgh. In these videos I take you around to Edinburgh, tell you some of its fascinating history, and you get a great English lesson at the same time. Today we're continuing with our story of Marie de Guise part 2. If you didn't see part 1, definitely start with that video. But yeah, I'm ready to dive in. Let's go! Okay, so before we dive into part 2 of Marie's story, let's just do a quick recap of part 1. Marie was born into a powerful French family and left France to marry King James V after she was widowed at the age of 21. She'd lost one son in infancy and had to leave her other son behind her in France. Henry VIII had also been after her as a possible bride, and when she arrived in Scotland, she fell in love with the country. After giving birth to 2 boys in just over a year, they both died within hours of each other. Henry VIII had been putting pressure on Scotland to convert to Protestantism, and this had ended up in various battles in the country, including the Battle of Solway Moss, where James got extremely ill. He died as Marie went into labour with her 5th child, and Mary, Queen of Scots, was born on the 7th of December, when the country desperately wanted a male heir to secure the line of succession. Scotland was aware that they were looking at a period of significant instability. They'd already experienced this with James V, who was also an infant king. His mother, Mary Tudor, had taken over the regency. But because of the laws of the land, she was only able to exert power while she was widowed. When she remarried, she lost custody of her children. Marie, however, was a very, very different kettle of fish. She knew what had happened with Mary Tudor, and she wasn't going to make the same mistakes. She was pragmatic, strong-willed, and had her family's counsel behind her. And at the age of 27, she could very easily have married again, but her priority was to secure her daughter's birthrights. Meanwhile, back in England, Henry VIII was busy plotting to try and get Mary, Marie's daughter, to marry his son, Prince Edward. Part of his plan involved freeing the Scottish nobles that he had hostage in the Tower of London and inviting them to the English court, showering them in parties and good food. He promised them all kinds of riches and allowed them to return to Scotland on the condition that they did everything they could to promote the marriage match, get Mary to be raised in the English court, and support Henry's claim to the throne if she were to die. This would tidily sort out all of Henry's problems with the French and also the papacy if the marriage went ahead. To make matters more complicated, it wasn't clear who should rule in Scotland. James hadn't left any clear instructions on who should take over the regency if he were to die, and it was very unlikely that he intended his wife to do so. The Earl in Arran, as next in line to the throne, was set to be the most obvious choice. However, Cardinal Beaton, one of the most powerful members of the church, didn't agree with this. He didn't like the Earl of Arran as an option because there were rumours surrounding the legitimacy of his parents' marriage. Cardinal Beaton was also an extremely ambitious man and most likely wanted to seize power for himself. He produced a document allegedly by the king saying that James had chosen 3 other lords and himself, Cardinal Beaton, to take over the regency. Arran was worried because Marie would naturally side with Beaton due to the French and Catholic ties, and he even threatened to pull a sword on him. In the end, Arran won that battle, and he was made regent. Marie cut a pretty pathetic figure. She was an isolated, newly widowed queen with a newborn baby. This didn't stop the Earl of Arran isolating her further by installing spies in her household and intercepting her letters. To make matters worse for her family in France, whose letters weren't coming through, there were rumours flying around that both Marie and Mary had died. But a letter from her uncle did manage to make it through, saying that she had all of her family's support, as well as the French king's. Marie's diplomatic skills had already been proven, but this is where her political ones would come to light. Arran was busy scheming with Henry to try and marry Mary off to Edward, and did his best to isolate Marie from court and everything that was going on. But Marie had got her strength back post-childbirth and was back to her old self. She was ready to fight, but she decided to keep her head low and her cards to her chest, as she wasn't willing to lose another child to the ambitions of others. She maintained this fake facade of smiling composure in front of Arran, while secretly conducting meetings with Cardinal Beaton. Now, Beaton had his problems, like a lot of them. He was a really, really corrupt guy. But he was the best of a bad bunch. For Marie, he signified the best option to protect her daughter's birthrights. In fact, Beaton had been extremely disappointed with the birth of a girl, and had even backed the claim of the Earl of Lennox, a noble living in the French court at the time. Marie knew that if she publicly protested the English marriage, it would bring all kinds of trouble down on her head. So she played for time, pretending it was a great idea. This must have been really hard, because it was even at one point suggested that she should marry Henry VIII first, due to Mary's young age. She played on them, making them think that she was simply just a complacent and smiling woman. In reality, she and Cardinal Beaton had written to the Earl of Lennox. They offered him the governorship of Scotland and Marie's hand in marriage if he came back and mounted a coup to get rid of Arran. Ever aware of what was going on, Marie realised that she needed to be here at Holyrood Palace to keep an eye on things. However, she didn't have a position on the council, so she wasn't able to observe Arran and his cronies as much as she would like. This meant that it was impossible for her to stop the arrest of Cardinal Beaton on Arran's orders. Clearly alarmed by this, Marie went immediately back to Linlithgow Palace. Here, Arran, deeply suspicious of her, stepped up the campaign to cut her off from the support of her family. This move neutralised the amount of power that being at Linlithgow gave her. The more time she spent there, the more she felt that she was being kept in a prison. She came to the conclusion that the palace wasn't equipped to protect them, and that they were in a vulnerable position. She had been hearing constant rumours that there were plans to kidnap Mary, and even worse, that Arran wanted her killed so that he could keep the crown. The rumours circulating that Mary was a sickly child would help any suggestions of foul play. She tried to get to Stirling, where she'd be more protected, but it wasn't allowed. Her movements were getting closely monitored, and she was being more and more confined. But some anonymous letters, most likely placed in Edinburgh by members of her family, did get through, which gave her key information on who she could trust or not. The English ambassador, Sir Ralph Sadler, was sent in to meet the Queen and find out for himself what was actually going on. Henry wanted the fate of the Scottish Queen decided once and for all. Sadler was pretty suspicious about how sincere Marie was about this marriage with England, and Arran had warned him that she was not to be trusted and would always remain loyal to the French. But when he met her, he was pleasantly surprised and, once again, completely underestimated her. She charmed him, assuring him that she wanted the best for her adopted country, and she was so happy that Scotland had finally produced a daughter to end centuries of conflict. Marie completely charmed Sadler using her intelligence, her good looks, and her charm. Despite appreciating her intelligence, Sadler still didn't put her in the running as one of the possible contenders for power. And Marie was very clever about this. She deliberately made no attempt to promote her claim. Instead, she worked hard on undermining Arran, telling Sadler that he was greedy, untrustworthy, and self-interested. She also told him that it was well known in Scotland that he wanted Mary to marry his own son, and he was just stringing the English along. To prove this, she said that the rumours of Mary's ill health must have come from somewhere, and took Sadler to the nursery to inspect Mary, so he could see how fit and healthy she was. This made Sadler extremely suspicious, because Arran had gone on at great length about how puny and sickly Mary was. So he sent off a report to Henry saying how frank and trustworthy Marie was, and Henry also seemed to agree. Meanwhile, Marie was working hard behind the scenes to get Cardinal Beaton released. She finally received news that Lennox had landed in Scotland with a small army. She'd masterminded a small coup, and Beaton was released a few days later. Lennox was very quickly charmed by Mary and quickly became putty in her hands. Arran became increasingly threatened by Lennox and found himself being pushed into the only support he could find: the English. On the 1st of July, the two treaties of Greenwich were signed. These would guarantee peace between Scotland and England. They stated that Mary would go to England at the age of 11, where she would marry Prince Edward. If the marriage was childless, she'd return to Scotland, which would continue to be independent and governed by Lord Arran. Arran was clearly delighted. Marie was fairly unfazed. She saw the treaties as full of loopholes and easy to ignore. The real problem was how unpopular this was once the news got out, because few people believed that Henry VIII would allow Scotland to be independent once he got his hands on the young queen. The people of Scotland had never been big fans of the English, but this went too far. Anti-English sentiment was rife, and Sir Ralph was even attacked in the street. The news that Cardinal Beaton and Lord Lennox were said to be getting troops together to form an army emboldened the country. Arran was horrified at intelligence that told him that a fleet had been spotted off the French coast. He mobilised his men and surrounded Linlithgow Palace, convinced the French were coming to carry out a coup and whisk Marie and Mary away. Marie managed to contact Cardinal Beaton and Lord Lennox, who were at Stirling Castle. The news that Arran had effectively imprisoned the Queen and the Dowager Queen was enough for them to be able to act. Although they were forced to withdraw, Arran didn't want a battle. An agreement was reached that Arran could only rule with a council, and that Mary would be allowed to move to Stirling and have 4 Scottish custodians appointed to take care of her welfare. Marie wasn't very happy about the custodians, but was pretty sure she could bend them to her will. She was, however, delighted that she could go to Stirling. Lord Lennox was now, at this point, completely besotted with Marie and convinced that she would marry him after her mourning period was over. Marie knew when to lie, smile, tell the truth, and keep her mouth shut, though. She had no plans of marrying Lord Lennox. Stirling, she knew, would be her permanent home. And once she was safely inside, she could be the one who decided her own fate. Now, just remember that at this point, Mary was only 7 months old. All of this had happened in such a short amount of time. And Mary was finally crowned on the 9th of September, 1543, at Stirling Castle. Arran finally admitted that he had lost. He rolled back on the moves towards Protestantism that he'd made to try and keep Henry happy, and he even snubbed the king when an offer was made to betroth his son to Henry's daughter Elizabeth. Marie, meanwhile, was stringing along the English ambassador about the marriage to Mary. The treaty was yet to be ratified, and Marie was really just buying time until a suitable French match could be made. Still being an extremely beautiful woman, she strung along a couple of lords who thought they had a chance of marrying her. They didn't. But she used this to ensure their loyalty. With the arrival of French gold, arms, and 2 extremely useful French political advisors, Marie went about formally invalidating the treaties of Greenwich, reigniting the Old Alliance, and celebrating the birth of a French dauphin, crown prince, who could be a potential marriage option for Mary. Things were looking rosy. But Henry wasn't happy. He was down in London simmering with rage and humiliation. Not a good thing for a guy who liked to cut off people's heads. Still wanting Mary to marry Edward, he began what is now called the rough wooing. Planning to invade both Scotland and France that summer, he gave instructions for the invasion to last no more than 3 weeks and said, I quote, "Put all to fire and sword, burn Edinburgh town. So raised and defaced when you have sacked and got what you can out of it, as there may forever remain a perpetual memory of the vengeance of God lightened on them for falsehood and disobedience." Edinburgh Castle survived, but Leith, much of Fife and several East Coast towns were decimated. Lord Arran, while not responsible for the invasion, was criticised about how he handled it and was forced to resign.
Seeing her chance, Marie argued her case for being in power, as she had the French allies available. She was appointed by the 12 lords on the council as Protector of Scotland, but it didn't last long though. Being a woman and a foreigner was a double whammy. She lost her title to Arran again when he challenged her, but she did manage to get admitted to the Privy Council.
Hey folks, so I totally intended the video of Marie de Guise to be 2 parts, but when I started editing it, I had so much to say about her life that it was impossible to do it in 2 videos. So I'm so sorry, you're going to have to wait for the end of her story in part 3, although it will be coming a lot sooner than you've had to wait for part 2. That for sure. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and you'll be the first to know about the end of Marie's story in Marie de Guise part 3 coming really soon.